Welcome, everyone, to our Tuesday evening Torah study and chat. And tonight we have two rabbis. It is October 12th, 2021. We have a Rabbi Barry Silver, the spiritual leader of Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor. We have Rabbi David Levin, all the way from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Rabbi David Levin is our guest tonight. He's a non-denominational rabbi, and he's also an author and an educator, as well as the founder of Jewish Relationships Initiative. And I think he'll give us a little bit of understanding of what that is, maybe later on in the program. And take it away, gentlemen.
Rabbi Levin, it's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for coming all the way from Philadelphia. It's kind of you to make that long journey to be with us through cyberspace. And
let me catch my breath.
I'm intrigued by your interdenominational Jewish background, and it'll be fun to explore some ideas with you and to watch your video montage that you have and explore any other concepts. The idea of this is to be able to discuss any concept from any point of view and allow all Jews to gather together under one roof, which sounds like what you're all about also. So I think you'll fit right in. Feel free to say anything you want. You don't have to worry about offending anyone. If they haven't been offended yet by anything I've said, if they can take anything that I'm saying, sure, whatever you dish out will be just fine. All right, so I'm going to go relocate. And while I do, I'll have you maybe introduce your video montage, and then we'll give people a chance to discuss it. Rabbi Levin, it's all yours.
Terrific. Thank you, Rabbi. It's a pleasure to be here. Sharon invited me to come on down, and for what was it, I'm not so much worried about offending, but I do love the idea of engaging with ideas. And Rabbi Silver, do you guys call him Rabbi Silver, Rabbi Barry? How do you address?
Any way you want, or Barry is fine, whatever you want.
Actually, Rabbi Barry.
Got it.
That works.
So anyway, he and I had a chance to talk a little bit, and one of the things that is of particular interest to me is end of life issues, and we were talking about the other side of the end of life issues, and I've worked with a friend of mine who has been working on Jewish views of the afterlife, and as you all know, Rabbi Barry has been working on that as well, and it was just fun in the couple of minutes that we had to talk how rationalism and mysticism could somehow mash up, and we could talk. And I did something. Here's a not so funny rabbi joke, but you guys have to bear with me. The rabbi goes through the service, and this group of people comes up to the bima afterwards and says, "Rabbi, I don't understand. We did the Shema and only half of us stood up. What is this craziness that they weren't standing up? Don't they understand what the Shema is about?" And he said, "Yeah, you're right. I understand." And he walks towards the oneg, and another group accosts him and says, "Rabbi, I don't get it. Did you see what happened during the Shema? There was this whole group standing up instead of sitting down the way we're supposed to do it. What's the matter with them? Don't they understand what the Shema is all about?" And the rabbi went, "Yeah, you're right. I understand what you're saying. That's a good point." And the first group overheard what the second group had just finished saying, and they come back over and go, "Wait a minute. You just said that he was right, and you just finished a minute ago saying we were right. Who is right?" He said, "You're right. Let's go eat." And the purpose for that is, as you folks are probably aware, Rabbi Barry has this particular view from a rationalistic point of view, what end of life means and what hereafter means, and completely within the Jewish sphere. And this particular individual with whom I wrote the book, Jewish End of Life Rituals, is of the more mystical aspects of the Jewish tradition and very much believes in the spirits and the living of the soul and the transmigration of the soul to heaven and our obligations to the soul and their process of shifting over to the other side. And I said that, and I said, "Yeah, it's kind of interesting stuff." And then Rabbi Barry said what he said. I said, "Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting stuff." He said, "Well, which side do you come down on?" I said, "I think you're both right." And he said, wait, you can't do that. I said, yeah, I can. Because we're Jewish. That's how it works. So the reason why I bring all of that stuff up is I'm delighted to be in a place where ideas are the framework for the conversation. And for me, as a lead into Torah study, Torah is, as all of you know, there are several levels on which we have engaged Torah. There's the pshat meaning, where obviously, as everybody knows, Rashi is one of the masters of, what does it really mean? On the simple level, what's really going on? Then there's the secretive meaning, then there's the hermeneutical meaning, then there's the mystical meaning, and all of that stuff is very fascinating. But there's one piece that I like to engage in, which I hope we're going to engage in a little bit tonight. And that's what does Torah mean to you? As individuals with life experience, particularly, we've lived life, and on the assumption that Torah is a people book, not a God book, but it's an opportunity to talk about the human condition. And I think the reason why it's endured for as long as it has is because it does focus on the human condition. That the stories that we read are stories that somehow we can relate to ourselves. And we can learn about who we are by engaging in those texts about these other people, whether they're mythical or whether in fact they were real. And whether or not they are is almost beside the point. As I shared with Rabbi Barry earlier, one of my teachers in the seminary said, if we are so thoroughly willing to believe that God can write historical fact for us, why would we be unwilling to consider the possibility that God could also write fiction? And whether it's fiction as metaphor or whether it's fiction as just good storytelling, I like to leave that to the reader and allow you to engage in it in the way that works. So Lech Lecha, the parsha before it, Noah, I think are two extraordinary examples of how we might be able to see ourselves in the multiple stories that unfold and the multiple experiences that these patriarchs, matriarchs, myths of our understanding of who we are all come together. So with that, give me just a moment. I want to share with you a little something that I had, that I put together this afternoon, actually, that hopefully will set the stage for some of our conversation. And let me, I don't know what I just did. Hold on just a second. And let's give it a try.
You do not know. Lech
Wow. Oh
Very
my
nice.
goodness.
So
Rabbi Levin, I think
I
I
hope
need to
everybody
give my
can
job
hear me.
to you.
I can't hear anybody else, so if anybody's talking.
We were all clapping.
Oh, okay. So let me ask, by just a show of hands, because we have a nice sized group here, or maybe by putting it into the chat box with either a yes or a no. How many people were born and raised in Boca Raton?
Nobody.
Yeah, that's what I figured. And as I mentioned to you, I lived in Fort Lauderdale and Delray for a number of years. So, and I was a transplant as well. I came from New York. I somehow returned to Philadelphia, which is another story. But we all, I'm sure you saw stuff there that you recognized in the pictures. And I'm sure that you all are enjoying your time in your new home. But I'd like to challenge that for just a little bit, insofar as when you go back to when you made the decision to leave the place that was familiar, to leave all of it behind. And for many of us in this space, that includes loved ones, the grandkids, the children, the dog, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers, you know, the variety of the ganze mishpocha that we all have, including the work, including the social communities. Think of the life that was. That is, in some respects, what Avram was doing. We don't know a heck of a lot about him, because, you know, all we know is what's there in Noah and then in this particular parsha. So we don't really know, outside of biblical midrash, what the rabbis read in between the lines and create the stories as to who he was, and all of those great stories that we think are Bible but actually aren't. It's rabbinic creation. But out of nowhere, he's told, you know, go find yourself a new place. I'm not even going to tell you where the new place is. At least you knew that you were going to Boca. Chances are most of you went down and visited for a couple of weeks before you finally made the commitment. But Avram was in a place and didn't know anything but that place. And whether it's a faith in God, whatever that might mean, or it's a desire for something better, a need to move on to something better, as Jonathan Sachs has put it in his commentaries on the subject. But I think we can relate to that. All of us that have faced life transitions can relate to that. So for those of you who have moved to Boca, I'm a second career rabbi. When I was living in Florida, I was working in commercial real estate and banking. And I decided to, shall we say, take the leap of faith, all puns intended, to go off to rabbinical school at the age of 50. As you can imagine, that's sort of a jump. So I left my synagogue, which was Temple Bat Yam down in Fort Lauderdale. So I left everything that I knew behind, took whatever couple of possessions I decided to hold on to and sent them to my sister for storage, and moved to Jerusalem, not having a clue what was awaiting me and not having a clue what was going to happen when I came back, but believing that there was something more important, and yet, you know, maybe some courage, maybe some foolishness, but being willing to take the risk. So I put it out there to you that the beginning words of our story, Lech Lecha, are in fact really important and potent words. And they give us a chance to see things in ways that I think are very, very important. The other piece to this is when I say that I think we all have a chance to bring it in for ourselves, and we all have an opportunity, therefore, to interpret what Torah means for us. You see that in translations all the time. I don't know how many of you are fluent in Hebrew. I'm going to defer to my colleague here and say he's probably better at it than I am. I'm half decent at it, at least enough to know that it is complicated. When you move from one language to another language, you by necessity have to interpret what it is. You have to not just translate, but interpret what's going on. So what I'd like to do for just a moment is I'd like to bring up another screen for just a moment. And let's see if I can do this. And let's see, hopefully everybody will be able to see this. Can everyone see this?
Yes, we see that.
So one of the things that I'm doing right now is, well, for starters, let's now step back for just a moment. Outline of Lech Lecha. For those of you who are familiar with it, it's a long, complex, multi-layered kind of a story. So I thought it would be good to start off with where I'm focused is actually number one, God calls Avram to the promised land. Then we see Avram sojourning in Egypt. And that's where we have the issue with him asking Sarah to pretend that he's his brother, her brother, instead of wife, so that he might be able to survive what they're going to do. Then they settle in Egypt. Then there are the plagues, which are sort of foreshadowing of the plagues to come from Passover. And Pharaoh gets pissed off at Avram because, hey, dude, if you told me that she was your wife, I wouldn't have thought these not so nice things about her. Then, of course, Avram goes to Canaan. God promises Avram the land, and of course tells him about the future. Avram defeats the 5 kings. Avram then is in covenant with God, and that is leading up to, of course, then Hagar giving birth to Ishmael, which creates a whole nother series of interfamily complications. As you're all aware, as Ishmael and Isaac end up competing, or even before that, Sarah finds jealousy with Hagar. And then ultimately God commands Avram regarding, well, at that point he becomes Abraham, and then commands him to circumcise himself. So between the listening to God to leave everything familiar behind as one bookend, and the command to circumcise yourself as another show of faith as the other bookend, we've got this interesting relationship between God and Abraham. And each one of these is probably an extraordinary series of texts to engage in, each in and of themselves. But I want to actually, again, continue to focus on God calling Avram to the promised land, because that's the starting point. And again, it goes to one of our great Torah commentators, Abravanel, who is out of the 15th, 16th century, out of Italy. And he does a really good job at sort of getting to the kinds of questions that we might be asking as when we think of ourselves as moderns and think that nobody really thought the way modern people think. But he's like, well, why did God ask him to go forth from his native land when, in fact, in point of fact, the chapter before he actually had already left? Why does he further say, it's not enough to just say go from your native land, but why does he go from your father's house instead of from Haran, which is actually where they were at the time? Why the mystery to a land that I will show you? If I said, we're gonna pack up the car and we're gonna move to Boca Raton, it's a lot different from saying we're gonna pack up the car and stop somewhere before we hit the ocean. And since God didn't tell Avram to go to Canaan, how did he actually know which direction to head in? There is north, south, east, and west. Not too much west, but enough that he could have moved. And for me, what makes Abravanel's questions so intriguing are that he's asking of the text kind of the questions I'm asking us as we begin to engage the text as well. How did we leave our familiar place to go to Boca? What did it take? I'm guessing that each of you had to go through a process of thinking about this, that this was not just a Thursday morning, oh, this weekend, let's drive to Boca with our stuff. That'd be my guess. I could be wrong. Some of you look maybe a little more adventurous than me, but who do you leave behind? And how do you remain connected? A person like Abraham, there wasn't a whole lot of, you can't pick up the phone or you can't get on Skype and see how dad's doing or what's going on at the old idol factory. Even our parents, the generation that came over here, or for most of us, the generation that came over from Europe, when they left their family behind, they left their family behind. They would find out in a letter long, long after events had happened that their loved ones had passed on, that developments, by the time I finally found out that my brother had a child, the child was probably a couple of years old at that particular point in time. And there was no opportunity for me to be able to interact with my brother back in the old country. They were essentially gone forever. And then, of course, you know what you to expect when you get here, and do you normally get what you expect? Was your vision highly romanticized, or were you just open to whatever? And then last but not least, I think this is probably the most important question and probably goes to why you're here with Rabbi Barry tonight and me. Have you created a good and meaningful life in this place? So by virtue of the fact that you're here, I would tend to posit for you that this is part of your meaning-making process. That finding community, finding a space to have a conversation, having a leader of the tradition that you find important to you as part of your identity, these are all things that help us create meaning. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But it's not like when you move to, you know, with all due respect to L'Dor Va-Dor, you know, I could go anywhere and I'll find a Chabad house nowadays. Yeah, go to Poland, go to Warsaw, you'll find a Chabad house. Go to Tucson, you'll find a Chabad house. Go to Camden, New Jersey, you'll find a Chabad house. And I think you've got 2 in Boca, if not more. But certainly there wasn't a welcome wagon, a Jewish welcome wagon when Abraham was wandering around the desert. So those are the kinds of the questions that I think are being asked of us to ask ourselves as we engage the text. So I'd like to go through and share this next. If someone would be kind enough to come off speaker and read this. This is a piece of poetry, because it speaks to the idea of being able to go forward, taking the risk of going forward, but understanding that going forward to this new place and taking the risk doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we end up having all of those dreams fulfilled. So if someone would be kind enough to read The Open Door for me.
I can do it.
Sure.
The open door. Either you will go through this door or you will not go through. If you go through, there is always the risk of remembering your name. Things look at you doubly, and you must look back and let them happen. If you do not go through, it's possible to live worthily, to maintain your attitudes, to hold your position, to die bravely, but much will blind you, much will evade you. At what cost? Who knows? The door itself makes no promises. It's only a door.
And does anybody have a reaction to this that they'd care to share?
Rabbi, if you would, I'd like to open it up now to people to ask questions or to react to this or to any of the other points or issues that you've raised. So maybe we could open it up now and see if anybody have a reaction to the open door or any of the other issues that were raised by Rabbi Levin.
I love that he's asking these questions and informing them in these type of questions that, you know, really makes you think. And I know, knowing that this passage was coming up, he's hitting home with questions I was asking myself this week and asking my family. And I love the video that he put together. It was really great, and I love the music, and I love that he picked places that were familiar to us. And thank you very much, Rabbi Levin.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, that was, by the way, that was Debbie Friedman.
Mhm.
Lech Lecha, one of
Yeah.
the songs that she really, it was one of her masterpieces. She had
Oh,
a few. That was a great one.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Go ahead, Emily. You can unmute yourself.
There's a new novel out that's kind of trendy called The Midnight Library. I don't know if anybody has heard of it, but it's about choices that you make in life that affect the direction your life goes, and how those choices can cause you to be what degree of happiness. And I think this kind of open door is a reflection of that. Personally, we rejected Boca as being much too elitist for us. No offense, guys. But we were looking for a much more multicultural, multi-ethnic place, which is why we chose Green Acres. So much for that.
Rabbi Levin, one of our guests, Valeria Mishka, asked if we could stop screen sharing so that we can see everybody on the screen. Unless you have more that you'd like to present, we could probably flip back into that.
I
Oh,
do.
okay.
We can go back into it
Okay.
when we're ready.
Okay.
By all means. By all
Rabbi,
means.
do you want to share anything about Lech Lecha?
Sure. Lech Lecha is one of my favorite passages. Lech Lecha, the Hebrew, is it's a double sound effect. It's Lech Lecha. It's used for emphasis, Lech Lecha, and it means, it's translated usually go forth. The interesting thing about Lech Lecha, it could also be interpreted go to yourself or go within. So what it's trying to say, I believe, is that each one of us has a part of us within us that's special and unique. And it usually gets buried under a lot of layers of defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms or indoctrination or cultural mores. Who we really are, our essence, is very often lost. So what the passage means to me, Lech Lecha, go within yourself and find out what it is that is true for you. What do you have to share with the world that's different and unique? And go within yourself, and then you can go forth. Where it's going to take you, you don't know. But all you know is it's going to be authentic to you, and it's going to be an exciting adventure, and it's going to get you out from under the land of your parents. This can be understood, not just geographically, but spiritually. Very few people have the ability to take their own upbringing and then decide they're going to go forth from there, build upon it, but come up with their own concept and their own ideas. That's what Abraham did. He smashed his father's idols and he became a smashing success. He was able to rebel. Most people think to be Jewish, you have to follow orders, follow instructions, do what Abraham did, go according to the rituals of thousands of years ago. You could do that, but that's not what Abraham did at all. Abraham didn't do anything remotely like that. He charted his own course. So if you want to be a follower of Abraham, you should take what you have and then chart a course that makes sense to you. Now, L'Dor Va-Dor does that also. We emerged out of reform and we're charting our own course. Where it's going to end up, not quite sure, but it's an exciting journey, and we're letting our spirituality and our uniqueness, and all of us are building this together. So to me, that's the exciting part about Lech Lecha. He rebelled, but he's also extremely loyal to his father, took his father with him, was very concerned about his family, but ideologically, he was a rebel.
I love your reading of this. It's not the pashat. It's the metaphorical meaning of, and I believe that entire first verse is exactly what you're talking about. The land is a metaphor. Go away from the land that you know. Go away from the stuff that's familiar. Go away from the stuff that is cradling you. That's we use this very often as well. We talk about circumcising our heart, to break free and open ourselves up to the possibility of what really truly lies inside, to really get in touch with our own understanding of our own self. And when we talk about Lech Lecha as go to yourself, that's precisely what the text is challenging us to do. And it's really all about not just going to Boca. It's about finding one's space, finding one's life,
Exactly.
finding the capacity to be fully present for yourself, fully aware of where you are, and fully also aware of what it is that you're leaving behind in the process of making this extraordinary move. Because I do believe that part of this, which I also think is important, that Rabbi Silver just touched upon, there's a courage element to this. Because things are going to be forever different. You're not going back. The things you leave behind are the things that are being left behind in this quest for something different, for something arguably greater. And when you do that with some sort of a sense of conscious action, that kind of deliberate action becomes an act of courage.
Yeah, most people never get there. Most people are very content to live out their script has been written for them, to follow the religion of their ancestors, to do so in an unthinking way, and to not challenge their own beliefs. The role model of Abraham is, like you say, Rabbi, to have the courage to chart your own course. Now, you mentioned in the beginning, because we spoke, and I mentioned that I don't believe in an afterlife. And I think it kind of cheapens this life. I'm thrilled to be here. I think this world is awesome. I don't need anything beyond this. However, at L'Dor Va-Dor, I'm not sure what the consensus is, but I know there's a whole bunch of people that don't agree with me on that at all. And that's part of what we're talking about. It's part of go within yourself and find out what you believe and come up with your own thinking, not necessarily what the rabbi is saying or the Torah is saying or what anybody's saying, but find out what you believe. But we also like to do that in a rational way, because if you just go what makes you feel good or what you're used to or comfortable, you might not believe in things that are accurate. If you want to remake your approach to Judaism, make it based on reality and accuracy and emet, make it true, there's nothing like reason and science to do that. So we measure everything against that. But at L'Dor Va-Dor, everybody is free to believe as they wish. And also, it's interesting that Abram at the time left the land of called When you're hesitating, you go, you can't make a decision. Most people remain in They just stay there. They don't have the courage to go and to go forward. So it's a very good metaphor. Don't stick around in that land of go. And you never know what might happen. You'll become a blessing, but you know that something new and exciting is going to happen. And it's why you're here on this earth. It's because you have unique qualities and abilities and beliefs. You can do things that other people can't. There's never been anyone like you. So don't get stuck in a rut. Go forth and find out what you are meant to be. And then you can be a blessing. One more thing I wanted to comment on what the rabbi was talking about. And I mentioned this before, it's a little complex, but he was talking about the simple reading of the text. In Hebrew, they have a wonderful acronym. It's called Pardes. Pardes means an orchard, and it's also related to the word paradise. Our ancestors believed that paradise was trees and an orchard and fruit. But in Pardes, it's an acronym. The P in Pardes means pshat, or in the English way would be plain. Pshat, plain, the plain meaning. Then you have Pardes, the resh is remes, is a hint of something else. Or in English, you could say the R is a reminder of something else. Then Pardes, the D is drush, which is a sermon, or in English, it's a directive, giving your life direction. And then the S in Pardes is the letter Samach. It stands for sod. It's the secret or the hidden meaning. There's plain meaning, the sermonic meaning, and then the hidden meaning. And I like to say that sod, the S, stands also for science. Scientific reality was hidden from our ancestors. It was something that they couldn't understand, were in no position to understand. But today we have the ability to understand the secret language of science and to really understand the Torah in ways that our ancestors couldn't possibly do. And that's what makes it exciting to be Jewish today. This Pardes is looking beyond the plain meaning to Lech Lecha. What does it really mean spiritually?
I love what you just did with Pardes, because when I think of sod, obviously I think of sod as opposed to science, but that actually is really interesting, and I think that what it's doing and what you're further encouraging us to do is to say, don't accept the status quo in a perfunctory way. There's no reason for it. And by the way, that's not that I'm doing a shameless plug for some of my work, but in my work on re-examining Jewish rituals, I'm asking the same basic question, that the rituals that we use served a very specific purpose. They were contextual. And rituals, think of a ritual as almost like a vessel, if you will. And essentially, until you put stuff into the vessel is empty. So I would challenge you that rituals in and of themselves are empty until we put meaning into them. And what our forefathers and foremothers were doing in creating rituals, were taking certain fundamental Jewish values and saying, here's a ritual under which we can celebrate this value. Well, what some of us are struggling with oftentimes is saying, well, this ritual just doesn't work for me anymore. And then throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And what I'm suggesting, and from what it sounds like Rabbi Barry would suggest, is that you can challenge the ritual, embrace the core, find the core value, that's really the essence of what it is, and then figure out how to reconstruct the ritual in a way that speaks to the value that encompasses our current understanding of who we are and what we are. So take science and bring it in and make this thing work for us. Get that value, which is really the timeless piece of Jewish wisdom, not whether or not you filled the cup once or twice or whatever, or you broke the matzah once, twice, or three times and you put the middle one in, or whether you hid the afikomen or somebody else had to find the afikomen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what is being said at the core, what's the value that's being communicated, and then restructure, rescaffold with a ritual which pays respect to the ritual of old, because it was the vessel that contained the value for so long, but rescaffold it with things that make this speak to us in ways that are relevant. Challenge our texts, challenge our tradition, because that's what's actually kept us vibrant as a people. We've always been willing to, frankly, do what Barry just suggested. Be like Abraham, test the waters, be disruptive, and see what happens when we look at it through a new lens.
Yeah, that's the only way you can really move forward, is to challenge the past and then break through it. My dad had a very pithy way of explaining what you're talking about, Rabbi, which you might want to use in your deliberations. He was a master at being concise. He said, the ritual should lead to the spiritual. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't lead to the spiritual, then it's not getting us anywhere. He also compared the ritual, kind of like what you're talking about. He said the ritual is like the frame of a picture. It leads you to the picture, but many people get stuck on the frame, and the actual picture they miss. And I think that a lot of people today, unfortunately, when it comes to Judaism, never get to the actual picture. They never see the big picture, and they get stuck in the ritual and never get to the spiritual. And so a lot of people, I think, in Judaism are just going through the motions, and they're not getting to the emotions. And that's why a lot of people get turned off by it, because they're not really, it's not explained to them what the essence of Judaism really is. It is not, as you say, it is not these rituals and these mechanistic ways of doing things. These are triggers to lead to something greater. And the same thing is true with Pardes, with the Pashat, the simple reading of the Torah, which many people get stuck in, and that's all they do. That's just the first layer. There's bigger layers beyond that we need to get to.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And so, on a topic for another conversation, but I think that the fault, dear Brutus, lies not in our stars, but in ourselves.
Absolutely.
The reason why our people are not connecting to the tradition more deeply is because our group, our colleagues,
right,
our cohort did a lousy job communicating what's really going on. We got
I agree with you.
We got so caught up in this, we will do and then we will hear, because that's what it said in Deuteronomy. But no, guys, that's not what it said in Deuteronomy. That's just a quote of a little chunk of text, and you can make anything say anything if you do it that way.
Or how about Da lifnei mi ata omed? Know who you stand before. You see it in the front of the synagogue, and I'm thinking,
all the time.
Do you really know who you're standing in front of? This God that you've constructed, this all-knowing God in the sky, do you really know what you're talking about? Do you know who you're standing in front of? And I agree with you, Rabbi. I think the fault lies squarely on the Jewish rabbinate. And I'll tell you why. I believe we have the greatest heritage ever. I believe there's so much to it, and there's so much to explore, and it has the potential to make this world a better place. It was implemented. And what are we doing with it? We're squandering it. We're not, if we can't communicate this heritage in a way that's exciting, then there's something the matter with us, because the product is really good. And if people are just bored by it and not interested, something's wrong. And that's why what I attempt to do at L'Dor Va-Dor is to recast it in a way that's a little different than people have heard, because whatever we're doing, it's not working. And we need to try something different. And I think what we need to do is take the amazing, astounding revelations of science and also the great revelations of Judaism and of ethical ideals, and unite them together and come up with something new, a new type of product, which is taking us into a new land. We're moving forward into a new direction, leaving our comfort zone and going somewhere else to explore. Where is this going to take us?
I agree. I really do agree. And I'll throw one more layer into this, which is what's important. In this day and age where we have 12,000 Facebook friends and everybody thinks they change the world by signing a petition somewhere. Remember that at the heart of Judaism is the deep interpersonal relationship. That this question that we're asking about ourselves because of being prompted by Abraham's journey and our own journey to your own paradise in Boca. I mean, God knows it's beautiful. I love it there. But it's really not about the place. It's about what you do in the place. It's about what you do with the people that you care about in that place. So the fact that, and it's a very granular kind of a thing, which runs contrary to the big mega structures that we're all talking about today. But I would suggest to you that we do more to advance the best of Judaism and the best of humankind when I am in deep relationship with one of you. When I am in deep relationship with my wife, wherever we are, that's the thing that makes Judaism thrive. You know, remember that story about how God sort of was in between the cherubim on top of the ark, that, you know, their wings were outstretched towards each other. And essentially the line says, and God dwells in that space. I take that to mean that the beauty, the extraordinary nature of what it means to be fully human, in even its divine component, is when we're in relationship to another human being.
Yeah.
And it's
I'll
that
give
kind
you
of activity. It's
I'll
that
give you a
kind of,
metaphor for that
Oh,
also,
please.
Rabbi. It's that if you look at the sun, which powers Earth, you have hydrogen atoms, and H stands for human being. And they like to keep to themselves. But under the gravitational pressure of the sun, they fuse together. And when these two H's come together, they give off power and energy. And human beings are like that too. When we're on our own, we don't accomplish much. But when we join together, as you say, and connect with each other and be part of a group, we give off energy that can actually empower the earth and literally makes the world go round. Another thing I wanted to comment on that you were saying is that as far as the place goes, many Jews think that the whole goal of the Torah is to march forward and to enter a Jewish state and to get to the Jewish state. What we're talking about tonight with Abraham is entering a Jewish state of mind. And the Jewish state of mind is one which sees the possibilities to improve the world and has an innate faith in humanity, in our goodness and our kindness and our peacefulness and our sense of justice and right and wrong and righteousness. To enter a Jewish state of mind is to give up our cynicism and the way of the world, which thinks that human beings are destined to continue to fight, and to enter a Jewish state of mind, which is filled with optimism and hope and faith in the goodness of people. That's the state that we want to enter into.
I love that. When I do weddings, you know, and I think about the Shever Brachot, it's all about that. And what I mean by that is the people in the streets are singing with joy, essentially what the Shever Brachot are saying. You know, after the blessings over the wine and the creation of man, the blessing then shifts to say we are celebrating and blessing the future of humanity. That the joy of two people finding each other and deciding, quite frankly, quite literally deciding that in opposition to that world of darkness, we're going to shine the light of love. That we aren't going to succumb to the horrors of the Yetzer Hara, to use Jewish terminology, or the evil inclinations or the darkness of humanity. We are going to celebrate that there can be life based on love, that there can be a future based on kindness and sharing and compassion, and even children, which is the ultimate expression of a future that we believe in that's hopeful.
Yeah.
So that is, you know, and we've always spoken about us as being co-creators with God. You know, he finished his work at the end of the sixth day, but that didn't mean that the work of creation was complete. And we are partners in the ongoing process of making this place what it should be.
Yeah.
What it
You know,
could be.
an interesting way of looking at that is there's something called the aha experience, when suddenly you have a moment of epiphany and you realize some great truth. What you're talking about, I call the Ahava experience. Ahava is Hebrew for love. It's all of a sudden you're hit with this power of love, and you have like this Ahava experience, like, oh my, this is really powerful. This is a beautiful thing. And that's what we experience at the wedding. We have an Ahava experience. I would like to open it up for others to ask any questions or make any comments. Go ahead, Sharon.
Well, I want to make a comment, because when you guys were talking before, both rabbis, Rabbi Barry included in part of the service for upcoming, which you haven't seen yet, a little story, if I can share, or Rabbi can probably share. And it's about a person, I think I'm saying it right, Rabbi, you might want to clean it up or something. But a person moves to a new place
Right.
and he asks a neighbor, what is this place like? What are the people like? How are they? Are they friendly? Are they nice? Are they kind? And the person says, well, where you came from, how were the people? And he says, oh, they were awful. They were mean. They were evil. They were nasty. That's why I'm moving. That's why I left. And he says, well, it's going to be pretty much the same here. Then there's another couple, another family, and they come over to him and they say, what's this place like? We're just moving in. What's it like? How are the people? Are they kind? Are they nice? They're basically the same thing as the other family asked. And he said, well, what were they like where you came from? Oh, they were wonderful. They couldn't do enough for you. They were lovely and loving and kind and generous and peaceful people. He said, well, you're going to find much the same here. So it's a point of reference, it's a point of whether you're thinking positively or negatively, where you're coming from, whether you're coming from, like Rabbi Levin said, a point of Ahava or love, or a point of evil, or not so good. So I thought of that story and I had to share what Rabbi, you're going to hear it in an upcoming service because it was pre-recorded, but it just reminded me of what we're talking about here almost. And it also reminded me when you started, Rabbi Levin, with your discussion, saying that, at 50, you left everything that was familiar. And I'm sorry, my dog's barking a little bit at the back, but you left at 50, you basically did a Lech Lecha. You left everything and you went to Israel, a place that you didn't know. You gave up all the stuff that was familiar, a familiar business, a familiar workplace, family, friends, your belongings, everything. And you went to Israel to become a rabbi and to learn Hebrew, et cetera, et cetera. So you did a Lech Lecha. You have, so what you're sharing with us, you did that personally. Each of us did that, when we moved to Florida. And whether we did it as we didn't go to another country, we just moved down from within the United States or whatever. But I think this has been a great discussion. I just wanted to share that Rabbi Levin does classes, does sessions. He has some wonderful topics. He's an educator, and he has offered to teach one or more of those sessions to L'Dor Va-Dor. That's why I invited him to be part of one of these chats so that we could be introduced to your philosophy, your way of talking and everything. And I think this was very successful for all of us. It's being recorded so the people that are not with us can listen and hear you and hear Rabbi Barry and how you showed the Torah and all that. So I think this is wonderful,
Rabbi Levin, I want to thank you also. We're not done yet. We're going to get to Emily in a second, but you can use this recording for your purposes if you'd like to let people know what you can do. And
Okay.
I'm very thrilled that you joined us. I think people at L'Dor Va-Dor would definitely be interested in hearing more of what you had to say. And Sharon, I appreciate you sharing that story. It's actually from Jewish lore. It's a very old story, but it's a very powerful story.
It is.
In that people tend to react to you the way you respond. If you go out and you say hello to people and you smile to people and you are friendly to people, you tend to get that type of reaction back. And if you go around with a sour look on your face and you're not friendly, it's pretty much when you're going to get back. And so it's a very powerful story about how we can affect our own future. And many people think, oh, I got to leave here and go somewhere else and then things are going to be better. It's not really like that. You have to change yourself if you want things to get better. And Rabbi Levin, I did kind of what you did, but not quite as dramatically. I was a full-time attorney until I was about 50. And then my dad started getting up in years and needed a little help. So I was doing part-time rabbi stuff, and then I started getting more involved and pretty much left my law practice behind, except for some pro bono civil rights things that I do. But I left my comfort zone of a law office and went forth, and I'm very, very glad I did. I met some amazing people here at L'Dor Va-Dor who are willing to also chart new territory, and it's just a very wonderful thing. I'm very blessed to be with these people and to be in an environment where they're welcoming and accepting of new ideas. I would like to now ask Emily to join
Can
the
you-
conversation.
Can you, two rabbis, elaborate on the statement that the Jewish clergy are impeding the advancement of Judaism?
Sure.
Go ahead, Rabbi Levin. I'll let you weigh in on it, and then I'll be glad to respond.
Okay. Oh, boy. Well, as the, what is a rabbi? A rabbi is supposed to be a teacher, as opposed to, say, a priest. We are not in a position where we act as intercessors or the intermediaries between God and human beings. Our job is to be his teachers. That's our primary focus. So we are supposed to be learned in the law. We're supposed to be learned in the tradition. And what I will tell you, though, is that is more complicated than just knowing stuff. So, there's three things. There's data. There's the stuff that's out there that you can collect data. You can formulate data into data points and then maybe connect the dots. And that might help you get to the place of maybe creating wisdom, or rather knowledge around a certain subject. But it's only once you are able to understand how that knowledge can be applied and when and what levers need to be used and how one uses that knowledge to advance yourself or humankind, that actually wisdom gets attained. So you've got data, and then you've got knowledge, and then you've got wisdom. And our job can't stop at either accumulation of data points or accumulation of knowledge. We've got to do a better job. So when I if you were to ask me what do, I would fashion myself as, shall we say, a lamplighter. My job is to be in relationship with you and figure out what your life journey is, what your path is, and then use the tradition as sort of a lamp to shine light onto that path to help you along your way. Not to tell you how to be a better Jew, not to tell you halachically what time you're supposed to have lit the candles, not to tell you this cover is good for the challah, but you can't use it for the matzah, that this you can walk this far because we've tied a string around Boca, you can carry your chicken over to grandma's house, but over there in Del Rey where they don't have the A-roof, you can't. That's not what this is about. That's not what this is about at all. And what I think, what I do, and what it sounds like Rabbi Silver tries to do, is say, how do we make this tradition work for us in a way that's constructive, that's positive, that gives our lives richer, deeper meaning? And if I can pull that off, then I think that a lot of folks will resonate with it. In my work in outreach, I'll step back. There are two kinds of Jews. I'm going to break the cardinal rule, and I'm going to say, divide everything into a binary. There are the serious people and there are the not serious people. Those are the denominations that I believe in. And if you're serious, then my job is to help you figure out how to fulfill. If you're not serious, there's not much I can do. We'll make sure that you're fed and you're happy, and that's good. But if you're a serious person, then here's my opportunity to say, here's the tradition. Here's a bunch of really, really smart people who have spent a lot of time talking about the human condition and the things that we confront, that we have confronted for as long as we've been people. And my job is to figure out how to allow you to connect to that wisdom, not for how you can come to that wisdom, but how that wisdom can come to you. So that's where I think we need to be doing a better job.
Emily, I'm going to answer your question this way.
Okay.
I'll agree with Rabbi Levin that there's a lot of different things that rabbis are supposed to do. A counselor, a consoler, an educator, a teacher, an inspirer, and a social activist, I would say, is a key role. The problem is that the rabbi also has an organization or a business, so to speak, and that's the synagogue. Rabbi has to keep the synagogue going and keep members from departing and try to attract new ones. If you're a freelance and you don't have a congregation, it's very different. I've been in that situation where I was a rabbi with no congregation. I could say anything I want and it didn't matter. I wouldn't lose any members or gain members. It had absolutely no difference. Now, if I say anything I want, there's a board of directors. Rabbi, you know, maybe you shouldn't have put it quite that way, or you shouldn't have said that. You might lose us some members. This is a very, very serious problem. Because Emily, when you ask, like, what are the rabbis doing wrong, or what should they be doing? When you have that imperative to not only speak the truth and to speak prophetically, but also not to get anybody angry, it causes people to become cowards, and it causes people not to say what they need to say. And so I divide Jews up into two categories. There's rational thinkers and irrational thinkers. Many rabbis will cater to the irrational thinkers and tell them what they want to hear. Oh, yes, yes, yes. It's very, very simple. The Torah says it, God wrote it, and you do it, and it's very simple. And you become a member of our congregation. We follow God's law, and as long as you're with us, we do things God's way, and you're going to be taken care of in the next life. Some people, even among the very Orthodox, even offer to pray for your loved ones to get them up into heaven faster. When you start telling people what you believe to be true, the emet, and you might say, hey, you know, there's really no good evidence that God wrote the Torah, or even that there's a personal God out there or an afterlife. Once you start saying that, people think, what are you talking about? That's terrible. And people want to hear things that make them feel good. When rabbis are in a position where they're not only consoling and comforting, but they're comforting with lies or things they know not to be true, that's a very, very dangerous position. And it's not good for Judaism, because most people today in a scientific age can see through it. And so I think the reason why we're losing members and people are not affiliating, I think the Orthodox are way too caught up in irrational rituals that don't really mean anything anymore and not engaged with the world. And a lot of the Reform are offering something that's very simple and easy, but not very engaging. And they don't really get into talking about God and spirituality. And the conservative are somewhere in between, not really sure. And most of them aren't really talking about God. They're not really engaging people who want to be spiritual and rational at the same time. And so people are just looking elsewhere. They're looking for a guru or a spirituality in Eastern religion, or they figure the whole thing's a bunch of nonsense. And a large, large, large majority of Jews don't believe that the Torah was written by an infallible being, because it defies reason and common sense, and so they just give up on it. The challenge for the rabbis today is to preserve tradition, to make that feeling that our ancestors felt of awe and wonder and a mission and a purpose and a sense of awe, to make that real, even in a scientific age, not based on things that are patently false, but the revelations of science which are clearly true, and to make that come real for them, and to fill them with awe and wonder, and in a sense that we Jews have a mission to make this world better. And when we feel that we really have this mission and take it seriously, and we're willing to speak out for it, then we're going to attract people. As long as the rabbis are told, don't say anything about this, don't talk about this issue, don't talk about that issue, keep that for some other time, we don't engage the Jewish people in what's going on in the world and what's real, and will be considered pretty much irrelevant. That's the challenge. That's the challenge, to preserve tradition and also to use the insights of science and to capture that sense of awe without having to pander to the supernatural.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what you might think about all that, because obviously not everyone would agree with my analysis, but maybe other people would want to weigh in on why they think that this great heritage that we have is being neglected by so many Jewish people today. I'd be interested in knowing your thoughts on that. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Valerie.
Well, I think that, getting back to some of the topics that you touched on, they were very, very interesting and very, very true, coming from my background, which was from an Orthodox temple, which is what I grew up in. And I made my decision based, as I said once before, on insight, not out of ignorance. So, what I found that, a lot of the Orthodox, they don't look at the Torah as being either metaphoric or anecdotal or sometimes prophetic. They look at it as fact. And that's something that's very, very hard for me to swallow. I don't look at Torah as fact. I look at it as metaphoric. I look at it as anecdotal. I look at it sometimes as prophetic, but I don't look at it as fact. And many, many rabbis do look at it as fact. With regard to keeping congregations and having a rabbi that has a congregation and not a congregation, I can appreciate the fact that it's a very, very difficult road to walk down. It really is, because I find when you make people angry to a certain degree, that acts as a stimulus. It gets people off their bottoms and makes them think or do something. But yet when you insult them, that acts as a shutting down mechanism. People shut down when you insult them, but people tend to get stimulated when you make them angry. And that is a very, very fine line to cross. And I can understand your dilemma sometimes when we talk about that.
Yeah, I can only say this, that when I have a case where I can say something to please someone that I know to be false, or to please the board, which I know is not accurate, I will always side on what I believe to be true. And I've often said, I cherish every member of L'Dor Va-Dor, but I would rather lose a member than lose our message. And I've seen too many ministers in my day pander to people by telling them things they know not to be true. I will never do that. And I can assure the congregants of that. There is as you say, Valerie, there's a very fine line between getting people, I guess, off their comfort zone and being insulting about their belief system. There's a very fine line. But I have found in my life that when people are willing to shake things up and make me think and jar me loose from things that I believe, I find that very helpful. And it happens all the time. I might be giving a sermon or doing a service and someone says, why did you do this? Why don't you do that? And when they're very negative, I think that's the kindest thing they could do. The worst thing they could do is to see me doing something wrong and not say a word and just let me keep doing it over and over and over and over again. The kindest thing they can do is say, you know what? I made a mistake. And to say it in a nice way, that's the kindest thing we can do to people, because we can help them to become better and to improve.
That in Hebrew is called a tochacha, or a gentle, loving rebuke. And it's held up as one of the higher virtues, that if you actually have the courage to go to somebody lovingly, not to beat them up, but to say, Rabbi, here's where I think it might not be quite as you said. Not, gee, that was about the stupidest thing I've ever heard coming out of a rabbi's mouth. You have no right to be calling him a rabbi. There are ways to do it, and there are ways, obviously, not to do it. But our tradition says that there's a sacred obligation to step into that space and serve as a teacher. And the other thing I think that also flows from that is that we all get a chance to learn from each other. When we're in relationship that way, we as clergy can learn, how do I know that I'm successful in a class? Because I'm learning from my students as much as I'm hopefully teaching my students, and that we're exchanging and learning from each other. And that becomes important in the process. We are rabbis. That makes us hopefully scholars and teachers and all of the things that Rabbi Silver elucidated, but it doesn't make us superhuman. It doesn't make us infallible. It doesn't make us above the issues that we're actually trying to engage in not just with you. Chances are the reason why we're engaging in these issues because they're burning issues for us as well. And
Yeah.
we're trying to be engaged in making it better for all of us, including us.
Well, what you say, Rabbi, is very important. In Judaism, the rabbi is a teacher. It's not a pope. He's not a pontiff. He doesn't have a pipeline to God. What the highest thing that we aspire to is emet. It's truth. It's reality. And the rabbi just offers some insights from tradition, and other people can. And the Talmud is just arguing and discussing and things. We don't believe that any person has a monopoly on truth, or even any book. That's called idolatry. And so we do hold up emet as a very, very high level. That's the epitome, not a human being. It's emet. And Rabbi, I can see that you are a very good teacher, because you get people to start asking questions and thinking things through. You've inspired a very interesting conversation here at L'Dor Va-Dor. We've had many rabbis on before, but I don't remember any conversations that were very open-ended like this. And I'll just share this with you before we depart. I have quite a few people now who have read some articles, or they're going to have a child and they want to convert. And we will be having those conversions. The people here, and a lot of board members here, they don't know that, but L'Dor Va-Dor is going to have some conversions coming up. We're working on them right now. And my father's method of conversion was not to teach and say, okay, you have to memorize all this, you have to learn all this, and then you're Jewish. He gave them his book, very concise book on Judaism, and he said, ask 10 questions. To be Jewish is to ask questions, is to be curious, it's to want to know. It's not to say, okay, now you're Jewish, you know all this stuff. It's, are you inquisitive? And that's what this is all about, and that's what you're talking about, Rabbi. It's having a sense of wonder and wanting to learn and always explore, and that's why we finished reading the Torah, and then right away we start again, because the learning is never ending. And that's what makes this a beautiful thing. And we go forth in this world filled with wonderful things to learn. Scientific revelations, religious revelations, and things about how the world is going to turn out. And if we're inquisitive and we're curious, then we have a fighting chance of achieving wisdom and knowledge. When our curiosity shuts down and we think, oh, now I got it all, I know everything, there's nothing left to learn, I got a handle on truth, that's when we're in trouble. That's all I have to say on this topic. And for tonight, I just want to say this before we go. There's a very important Shabbat celebration this Friday, and we're going to be talking about the environment, which I believe is a critical issue that the Jews need to weigh in on. And it's going to be a fun outdoor service. It's going to be what Rabbi Levin was talking about, interconnecting, not a video, an interconnection of people. I encourage you to be there if you can, and to take some friends with you, because I'm very excited about it. We have a lot of good things planned in the future for L'Dor Va-Dor, and I'm getting a lot of interest, people calling up, asking questions about what we're doing. And I think once this pandemic comes to an end, and I think that's coming soon, and we're back meeting live, I think L'Dor Va-Dor is going to start expanding and growing like never before. I can see the interest out there and the desire to reconnect. And Rabbi Levin, I appreciate your stimulating that reconnection among us and getting us thinking. Thank you very much. And I'll leave it to you to close us out with the last word.
Well, it was certainly a joy. I appreciate, Sharon, you inviting me in, and I appreciate very much having a chance to spend some time learning from your rabbi and learning with your rabbi, and sharing the insights that you have also shared, all of you that have participated. Thank you. So for whatever it's worth, we have actually gotten through the first 6 words of the parsha. Vayomer Adonai el Avram Lech Lecha, and God said to Avram, go forth, or whatever Lech Lecha means. And hopefully Rabbi's charge to you is a Lech Lecha charge, and that we all listen, take heed, embrace it, and move forward as the community that you are. And I just want to again say, thank you for the chance to engage with you in Torah.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much,
so
Rabbi
much.
Levin.
It was
Thank
a
you.
wonderful hour and a half, or hour and few minutes, and thank you so much for being a part of this, Rabbi Levin and Rabbi Barry and everybody else that was a guest here. And this will be on YouTube probably tomorrow, and I'll send you the link, Rabbi Levin.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
You
Thank
too,
you
Rabbi
all
Levin.
again.